Welcome to Calling the Shots, the show that puts the public address announcers and broadcasters in the spotlight to share their stories from behind the microphone. Gulliver Prep Academy in Pinecrest, Florida has a very impressive list of alumni who went on to become legendary. We got Sylvia Fowles of the WNBA, pop star Enrique Iglesias, tech whiz Eduardo Saverin, the late great Miami Hurricane, number 26, Sean Taylor, and even Jamal Mashburn Jr., son of Miami Heat star Jamal Mashburn. Today's guest is also on that list of distinguished alumni, and this man has been behind the microphone for over 40 years, calling basketball at the high school, collegiate, including his alma mater at Florida International, and most notably for over 34 seasons, including 3 NBA championships, 7 NBA finals with the Miami Heat. So stand up and make some noise for the one and only Michael Baiamonte. Thank you so much for joining me today, Michael. I appreciate it.
Oh, Joel, thank you. That was a great introduction. I mean, you get behind the microphone and you're calling the shots on this podcast. So thanks so much for that. It's fun to hear some of those people that attended Gulliver Prep. They are certainly came well after I did. But that's really where I got started in a gym that they referred to as the Blue Dungeon. That's when I called my first ever boys basketball game and led now to 34 years in the NBA, and very proud of those alums and what they've accomplished. And I've been thrilled with my career as well.
Absolutely. And yeah, plenty to be proud of there. Like I said, the Heat have stacked up the accomplishments over the years. A lot of consistency there with Coach Riley, Coach Spo, and obviously the team they build every so often. So for those who may not know, could you give us a quick rundown of PA career, including maybe how you got started outside of Gulliver? I provided a brief overview in the intro segment, but I think some people would rather hear it from you than me.
Sure, Joel, happy to do it. So I was kind of drawn to basketball. I moved to South Florida when I was a young kid. I was 9 years old. This was the early 70s, so there was no Miami Heat. And every week we would get the game of the week on NBC or CBS. And for a lot of those years, the game of the week always included the Philadelphia 76ers, back when they had Julius Erving, Dr. J, a lot of players that in the 70s and late 70s were just really known in the NBA. And I would watch these games and I would hear this voice in the background, a giant booming voice. And it always made me curious as to who was that booming voice and what was his role. And I kind of liked it because he was saying something and the crowd was kind of responding to it. And so I kept watching these games and listening to that voice. It wasn't the play-by-play guy. It wasn't the analyst. It was a guy that I would come to find out was called the public address announcer. And his name is Dave Zinkoff. And Dave Zinkoff was the longtime PA voice of the Philadelphia 76ers. And I started listening to Dave on television, and watching those games is how I learned to be a PA announcer. When did he say things? What did he say? All of this, I'm really, listening as closely as I can. And I said, I want to do that one of these days. And so I go to high school, as you mentioned, at Gulliver Prep, play a little bit of basketball. That's not going to work very well. So I go to the headmaster of the school and I say, would it be okay if I announced the boys basketball team? And he says to me, that'd be fine. Just do me a favor, clear it with the visiting coach and with the officials before every game. As long as they say yes, you can announce the game. Well, nobody ever said no. So I announced all of those games and had a great time with it. Graduate from high school, go to college. As luck would have it, my freshman year at Florida International is the first year that they have a men's basketball team. And so they need to hire all these positions, including a public address announcer. So I audition for the job and I get the job as a freshman student announcing my friends and classmates and players on the men's team at FIU. I do that. I graduate from college. I go into what we would call the real world. I'm in the
Yeah.
insurance business, and I keep announcing for FIU, Florida International. So I'm in the insurance business by day, basketball announcer by night. Um, all of a sudden, here comes the Miami Heat. Well, at the time, Florida International was the only school in Miami that had a basketball program. The University of Miami did not have one at the time. So I'm the only guy announcing basketball in town. Put in an application. Here's my resume. Would love to talk to you about the job. Get a letter back, crushing letter. We already have a public address announcer. Thank you. We'll keep your name on file. You know, one of those don't call us, we'll call you things.
Yes.
Come to find out, made a lot of sense. In the team's infancy, it made financial sense to have multiple people do multiple jobs because you're trying to work kind of on a tight budget. So they had the vice president of communications double as the public address announcer. So he does both. And I'm still doing college basketball, working in the insurance business. And one day the phone at my desk rings and I answer it. And the person on the other end says, "This is so-and-so from the Miami Heat. Our announcer is sick. We understand you announce basketball in town. Can you fill in for him?" My first reaction is, which one of my jerk friends is on the other end of the phone here trying to kind of play a trick on me? It turned out to be legitimate. I go down and announce the game. It was the Miami Heat hosting a team that doesn't even exist anymore, the Seattle Supersonics. The Seattle Supersonics have now gone on to become the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Yep.
So I announced the Supersonic game. The next morning, get a phone call from the Heat. "Great job last night. We'd like you to be our permanent backup." Great. I'll take the job. Why not? And so I served as the backup for an entire season. I did some preseason games. They didn't need me during the regular season, but I was there in case they did. And then that next year, the vice president of communications had to take over a family business in San Diego, so he had to leave the organization, leaving the job of public address announcer open as well. So the team held an open audition, and I re-auditioned for the job. And 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from a name that a lot of Heat fans will know. He's certainly not in the same position he was 34 years ago. His name is Andy Ellisberg. And at the time, Andy Ellisberg was in the public relations department, and he called me and offered me the job 34 years ago. And so here we are now on your podcast talking about how I went from the Blue Dungeon to Kaseya Center and being in the NBA for 3 decades plus.
That's an incredible story. Just to hear you, the little bumps in the road that, well, you know, don't call us, we'll call you, to the serendipitous, I'm sick, come fill in, and then just taking off from there. Takes a lot of luck, things like this, I think, sometimes. And I definitely think the Heat lucked out in the long run. So,
well, that's nice of you to say. Thank you. And Joel, you're absolutely right. I talked to so many people, young up and coming announcers, how do I do it? How did you do it? How did I do it? And luck is a big part of it. But I will say, and I tell this to a lot of people I talk with, you need to take every gig that you're doing and think that your next one is coming from somebody sitting in that building listening to you, because that's how you make your own luck. The Heat didn't call me out of the blue and just took some random chance. They knew what I was doing. Someone had heard me that was inside the organization. He's a very good friend of mine. He's a Spanish play-by-play announcer, Jose Pañeda. He kept my name in their ear saying, "This guy knows what he's doing. He can handle a microphone. It's not too big a job for him." So it's always thinking ahead. Who's listening to me? Who's in this building today that might hire me tomorrow? That, I think, is where you kind of make your own luck.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I look at every game that I call as an audition for something like your job, right? I always think maybe Coach Riley's got a grandkid playing girls basketball in the middle of Indiana today. So what do I know? But yeah, it's a lot of luck, a lot of skill, just a lot of good timing, things like that all together. But I think for everyone, it's worked out in spades. So what does your game day setup look like? Right now, what I use is very archaic, just a microphone and some paper notes. Do you have anything like mixers, iPads for your scripts, soundboards, things like that? Or do you just kind of paper and notes as well?
So for the longest time, it was much like you explained. It was a microphone and it was a paper roster
Mm-hmm.
of both teams. And it was 15, 20 pages stapled together of what we call the game night script. And that worked fine. That was great. And then our game operations director came up with an idea that we would use what we call like a live edited document, which is done, frankly, it's just done in Word. And so
Mm-hmm.
now I use a Microsoft tablet
Okay.
and I have a Word doc on there that has my rosters on it. I also import the script, which this is amazing. He can update the script as we're going if something is to
Very nice.
change, and it immediately updates on my tablet. So I'm working pretty much now all with a computer operation. I don't, I've never, and this goes back so many, many years when I started. I started first announcing 45 years ago. Nobody wanted the PA job. It
Right.
wasn't very popular for some reason. But the one thing it was just the public address.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, so many guys are in charge of also playing music and mixing this and that. I've never had to do that. I've never been asked to do that in my career, probably because it became a thing once I got established with the Heat, where we've got professionals that are running those operations just like I'm doing mine.
Perfect. No, that makes perfect sense, and that's actually a really nice segue into my next question. I was going to ask if you have any. Do you give any input regarding the game experience? Obviously, not maybe music, but the lighting or the pyro. Would say, hey, let's do the lineups at this time, or let's wait until this is over to do the next step, or is it just you fly by night and you just do as the schedule laid out in front of you?
I have to say, the Miami Heat have been amazing in listening to everyone's ideas, thoughts, suggestions, and seeing what that combination is that works the best. Um, some of the things that I have offered to the organization, some didn't work. Some of them have worked incredibly. You used one of them at the top with my introduction, the
Mm-hmm.
stand up and make some noise for your Miami Heat. Uh, that came out of a marketing trip that the team took and visited 3 or 4 different NBA cities. They do that
Mm-hmm.
regularly. They kind of go and look and see what other people are doing. And I remember uh, my boss came back and said, "Hey, I was at one of these cities, and right before we introduced the starting lineup, the PA announcer had a call to action." He said, I can't say I remember exactly what he said, but it was something like to let the fans know, okay, folks, here we go. This is the start of the show. He said, do you think you can come up with something like that? I said, well, give me a couple of days to think about it and I'll
Yeah.
see what I can come up with. And so, came back home, thought about it, didn't want anything too wordy, wanted something that, I could make it sound good and fun and something that the fans would react to. So I kind of a call to action as he asked for. So game night comes and we're sitting next to each other. He's the game ops director at the time. I said, I think I got it. I said, I'm going to try it tonight. He says, okay, great. So, moment of truth. And now, stand up and make some noise for your Miami Heat. Nobody stands up. Nobody makes any noise.
Oh,
And we just move into the starting lineup. And I'm like, oh no, I'm going to be skewered for this. And he turned to me, he said, you know what? I like it. We're going to stay with it and we're going to keep doing it, and the fans will eventually get it. And that was at least 30 years ago. So it's worked. It's things like that. Another one, if I can tell you another collaborative story, which is really
Absolutely.
re- probably the most popular one today. I'm in a planning meeting, a production meeting, and the question comes up to our season ticket folks because there's a lot of different departments in this meeting. They say, "Hey, can you tell us what the breakdown of our season ticket holders look like? From a race standpoint, from this standpoint." And they said, "Yeah, it's almost identical to Miami-Dade County, which at the time
Hmm.
was about 50% Hispanic, 50% non-Hispanic." Like, okay. So the marketing guy said, "Hey, can we do something in the game that's kind of a hat tip that says, hey, we get it, Miami. We
Yeah.
get that, we've got a lot of people here that have a great background, Hispanic Latin background. That's a big part of our culture." And so they throw that out, and everybody in the room turns around and looks at me. Why is everybody looking at me? And they said, "Well, can you think of something that we can do that our Latin community might appreciate?" I'm like, "Oh my goodness. Okay. Well," and then we just started spitballing a little bit.
Hmm.
I was like, "Well, my Spanish is kind of iffy, so we don't want to do anything that's really, I don't want to like read things in Spanish because
Right.
then you're going to lose 50% of the audience." I said, basketball is a game of numbers. The numbers are one, two, and three. I said, everybody, whether you speak a lick of Spanish or not, everybody knows uno, dos, tres. Everybody does
Easy.
it. So I said, it's got to have something to do with that. Now, free throws worth one. You got a basket, that's two, or 3-pointers, three. That seems to be getting in the weeds a little bit. And then I had this idea. One of the requirements that I have as an announcer in the NBA is I have to announce when we are in the last 2 minutes of every quarter.
Hmm.
The reason for that is because the rules tweak and change just a little bit. So I'm letting the teams know, I'm letting the referees know, hey, we're in that last 2 minute period where we go under 2 minute rules. I said, what if I said it in English and then repeated it in Spanish? I don't think we'd lose anybody. I think
No.
people might appreciate it. So it would sound like 2 minutes, dos minutos. I mean, minutes and minutos are almost the same word.
Perfect.
So I think everybody start nodding their head. Oh yeah, yeah,
Uh-huh.
I think that'll work. And the game ops director, the new one at the time, he says, "I got a better idea." Okay, let's hear it. He said, "What if you say 2 minutes, then you say dos, and all of the fans yell back to you minutos?" I said, "Well, yeah, that sounds like a great idea, but how are we going to get 20,000 people to know to say minutos back to me? I mean, how do we do that?" He said, "Leave that up to me." So for an entire season, Joel, we took our hype squad, the gang that's in the
Hmm.
stands, getting the fans all fired up. We'd put them in different sections of every quarter of every game every night with a sign that said minutos. And so they would tell the fans, hey, it's getting close to 2 minutes. Mike B's going to say dos, and we're going to hold up the sign, and you guys say minutos. The repetition of this over and over and over and over, it caught on. And now it's an iconic thing, not just inside the Kaseya Center at Heat games, but you go anywhere and somebody yells, dos, somebody else somewhere in town is going to say, minutos. I have so many parents that come to me and say, that's what we use when we tell the kids it's 2 minutes until bedtime or 2 minutes until dinner or whatever it might be. So it's really caught on. Again, that story, like the stand up and make some noise, just goes to show how the Heat works, how they're receptive to ideas, and how they build on ideas to make it even better. Um, I that is very important to me, and probably one of the reasons why our relationship has been so great because we can work together to make something really, really good.
Wow. Yeah. That's those are incredible stories. Just to hear the origin of such legendary pieces of Heat culture, really. Um, I hear a lot of people talk about, Dos Minutos and make some noise still, even here in the Midwest. And it's, they might not like the Heat, but they really like that, how it gets everyone's attention, gets the crowd involved, it keeps people engaged. So yeah, that's some really special stuff.
And as a PA announcer, probably obviously early on in my career, the most exciting part of the night is the starting lineup. That really that's
Yeah.
kind of that's when the light is on you and you're kind of doing your thing. And I remember having a conversation with the guys again, saying, how can we replicate that excitement and enthusiasm in other parts of the game?
Hmm.
And so we came up with this. At the time, it was a novel idea. Okay, well, let's see how the game goes. If we're in a really close, big game, let's replicate that energy. We're not going to introduce the starting five again, but maybe we can do something where you do the stand up and make some noise for your Miami Heat as they're coming off the bench, going back into the game at a really important time that leads into a chant of let's go Heat or defense, depending on where you are in the game.
Hmm.
And so that's been a huge hit as well. And obviously that's something that has been adopted over and over by every institution everywhere, because let's be frank, stuff that works we love to steal from each other. We know all that, right? So
Yeah.
if it works and you like it, I'm going to try it. And so it's all of those different things that have really, since I've been in the league for so long, the change
Hmm.
from day one to day now, whether it be technology, whether it be in-game experience, whatever it might be, it has really, really kind of changed and grown to where it is, from our standpoint, entertainment. We're trying to
Yes.
entertain that crowd in a way that we can. The players are doing it in the best way,
Right.
but we are doing it in a supportive role.
Hmm.
And I think that has really, really grown and developed over all these years that I've been behind the mic.
Yeah, absolutely. So are there any current PA guys you hear around the league that you really like? Maybe try to emulate some of those things, or do you just kind of stay in your own lane?
I think all of us have our own way of doing things. And I talk to a lot of the guys. Social media obviously has allowed
Hmm.
us to put together a group where we talk on social media a lot. Um, and for example, I had a conversation with Sean, the PA guy in Dallas with the Mavericks, and
Hmm.
he was curious, like your question. He said, "You got to tell me how this Dos Minutos thing started." He said, "That thing's amazing." He said, "I love it." And so we share ideas, we share things. Hey, this worked. This was terrible. Hey, stay away from trying to do this or whatever. Um, but really, it's a matter of what works for your fan base.
Hmm.
While Dos Minutos is unique all around the country, it really works in Miami and it's iconic in Miami. I don't know if it would be iconic in Detroit.
Right.
Mace has got his Detroit basketball, and that
He
works
does.
great. So we all kind of have our own little shticks.
Hmm.
Um, and what works for some, for our fan bases, it probably wouldn't work for others, but that's okay because each of us is able to find that niche that works. But we definitely stay in touch. We do communicate. Um, about 4 years ago, all 30 of us got a very, very interesting opportunity from the manufacturer of the NBA 2K video game,
Yes.
where they came to us and asked each one of us if we would be willing to lend our voice to the video game. And certainly I, went to management and said, "Hey, I've got this opportunity." And I'm sure their answer was the same as all the other teams. Well, we're certainly not going to be the only team not to have our announcer in the game.
Right.
So absolutely, absolutely, we want you there. And so that's given us a chance to connect, whether we're in the studios together, maybe a couple of us in the same day, or just back and forth. Hey, how much fun was that? It's really been great. That's another networking opportunity for us, to get a chance to talk and see each other. And being a part of that game is an amazing experience.
Yeah, I watched all the videos. I think everyone that was included in the game has a little 2-minute YouTube video on there, and yeah, that was kind of special to see that and see how everyone does their little routines. Their 2 or 3 famous pieces in there. Like you said, Mace has his things in there, and Kyle Speller from Denver
Yep.
does a lot of interesting things as well. Um, so going back to the fans a little bit, you kind of mentioned this before, but there's 82 games in a year. Not every game is a capacity crowd or even a close game. Last night, actually, I was calling a game that was a very one-sided blowout. The home team took advantage and just ran with it. It was never close. Cases like that, not that there are many in the NBA, there's a lot more parity, but um, maybe just a very small crowd in a blowout or something. Do you ever read the audience a bit and take down the intensity, or do you try to stay on that high level all the time? Or
Yeah, I try to keep it up as best I can. Um, and it's hard. I mean, being a PA guy, I mean, you're sitting there, and if you see some of the crowd up and leaving and the game's not over yet, I mean, that you certainly don't feel good about that. I've always had the thought and idea that I don't know all of the people that are sitting in that building. Some of them might be in that building for the first time ever. So I'm going to try to deliver the best I can for those people that are there. They're there for the show of it, and I'm going to lend my part. So I try not to show my dissatisfaction or the fact that I'm
right?
bummed out. Because believe me, I'm just as unhappy as our Heat fans and Heat Nation when we're not winning games. But if I start losing that edge, boy, then I think the whole feel of the building just gets worse and worse. So I try to
Yeah.
keep it up as best I can. Again, you don't know if that's the first time they're there, and you want them to have a great experience, even if you go home with a loss. That's the one thing I ask when people
Mhm.
say, "Oh, I was at the game. I had a great time." I said, "Did we win or lose?" They said, "Well, we lost." I said, "Well, did you still have a good time?" "I had a great time." Well, that's what matters to me. That's what
Yeah.
matters to me. Obviously, the basketball side's going to say something different, but to me, and part of the entertainment experience, the Heat experience, we want them to enjoy that, win or lose.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, that's at least half the ticket price is the experience of the game. Season ticket holders are going to be there regardless. Diehards are going to be there regardless. But yeah, you got to pretend like it's everyone's first game, I guess, in that regard. So I think looking back at some old interviews that you've had, I think you mentioned that Dwayne Wade is probably your favorite player to announce. Does that still hold true? And also, who's your favorite current player to announce as they come out, maybe for starting lineups or during one of their scoring plays?
So I'll go ahead and explain the Dwayne Wade thing, but I will say a question like that to a PA announcer is like asking a dad which one of your kids is your favorite.
Yeah.
So we have had so many great players come through our organization over my entire career, whether it be Alonzo Mourning, Tim Hardaway, Shaq, D Wade, LeBron. It's been phenomenal. The reason that I responded to D Wade that way is he's the only player that I've ever announced that at any point, any time, with any inflection, with any enthusiasm, high, medium, low, whenever I said his name, Dwayne Wade, or at the line, Dwayne Wade. Anytime the name Dwayne Wade came out of my mouth, the crowd went bananas, no matter what.
Wow.
Regardless of what it was. If he's coming out of the game, he
Uh-huh.
replaces Dwayne Wade. Crowd went nuts. So I've never had a player that got that kind of reception regardless of the reason why I said his name. Now, maybe the only time they didn't is when I called a foul on him. But
Sure.
short of that, basket introduced in the game, brought out of the game at the foul line. Never had anything like that with any other player. And so that's why I would say D Wade is the one that stands out because it's so unique in the reaction. And, we still have it. I had a chance to introduce him at the start of the season when we unveiled the statue outside of
Yes.
Kaseya Center. Crowd lining the road on Biscayne Boulevard. I say his name and they go bananas. I mean, that'll never change. That'll never
No.
change. Um, our, currently we've got some guys that are really a lot of fun.
Mhm.
Um, Bam Adebayo is one that I really, really enjoy working with. And I do a couple of different things with Bam. A traditional basket, layup, jump shot is Bam
Mhm.
Adebayo. But then a slam dunk is just plain old bam. And because I mean, that's what he does, right? He just
Yeah.
bams the ball in that basket. So I have a lot of fun with that. Um, there have been instances, not very often, and I don't know if there's going to be many out there that can even remember it, but um, a kind of a vicious dunk by Bam, and he gets fouled. That is a bam good basket. Kind of a play on words a little bit.
I love it.
Um, but again, it's a situation that's so specific that it's like when Alonzo Mourning would have a ferocious slam dunk, that became good morning. So, sometimes within the game, if there's certain things work out, you can throw a few things in there. But I enjoy playing around with Bam, and then obviously the season that Tyler Hero is having is just unbelievable, and so
Yeah.
that's been a lot of fun. We've been trying to figure out, is there some way to incorporate the 3 call into the Tyler Hero call, but I haven't got it to somewhere now where it just doesn't sound forced. It's got to sound
Yeah.
like it's just kind of happens on its own, and
Right.
so that's the one thing I try not to do, is try not to force things that sound too kind of sticky.
Right. When you say something and then you immediately just kind of cringe and look at yourself like, why did I do that? Yeah. That's, I can't say I haven't done my fair share of those. So kind of coming off the D Wade thing, I believe it was March 9th of '09, the This Is My House game. He climbs up on the scorer's table. Was that your table or was that the other side?
It was not. It was on the opposite side. It's
Okay.
where the owner sits, and at the time, it's where home television, the broadcast team was there.
Okay. Um, yeah, that was an incredible moment just overall in Heat history. But what was your favorite moment to call? Was there something else that jumps out at you as
Yeah,
being just iconic for you?
yeah. The probably the most iconic moment um, in my career has to be the 2013 NBA Finals, Heat Spurs, Game 6, down 3, clock is ticking. LeBron shoots a 3, misses. Chris Bosh rebounds it, passes it out to Ray Allen in the corner, which we still
Mm-hmm.
call the Ray Allen corner. Uh, Ray Allen puts up the 3. He makes the shot. Crowd goes bananas. Probably the only basket I've ever announced over the public address system through a booming sound system that no one heard any of it because it was so loud in that building. I might as well have been on mute. I mean, you couldn't,
Right.
it was unbelievable. That basket. We go to overtime. Heat wins game 6, force game 7, win game 7, back to back NBA titles, the third of our 3. And so that one basket is the most iconic without question. And I think the NBA listed it as maybe the number 1 shot in NBA playoff history of the
Wow.
last 30, 40, 50 years. It was
I
it
could
was
see that.
it's been pretty wild. But short of that, the D Wade moments, when you take them collectively, the This Is My House,
Hmm.
going back to our first NBA championship against Dallas in '06,
Hmm.
games 3, 4, and 5 in Miami, when we're down big in the third quarter and Wade says, I'm not going out like this.
Hmm.
He comes back on the floor, and this is the third quarter of game 3. We're down 0-2. We're getting ready
Yeah.
to go down 0-3. And he all of a sudden becomes the best basketball player on planet Earth. And at that moment, those next 3 games at home for me, I'll never forget. I mean, he was incredible. Obviously, we take all 3 of those games, go back to Dallas and take game 6, and that we get our first title. So collectively, D Wade's got so
Oh
many
yeah.
of those memories in my career that I would have to say he is the most iconic that I can remember. Um, but the Ray Allen shot, the single most iconic shot, definitely goes to Ray.
Oh yeah. I'd say the Heat were all but dead and buried at that point. The ropes were out there. The trophies were about to be wheeled out. I'm sure the champagne was in the locker room, and then Ray changed all of that pretty quickly. And I think
He
for the,
did.
I don't want to say for the better. I try not to show my bias, but you can see where I'm sitting in front
Yeah.
of the floor, so the bias is there. But yeah, it was an incredible moment. I think Mike Green almost exploded, as well as 17,000 strong.
Oh,
So that was, yeah, what an iconic moment, and just to be there and call that would have been, I don't know, that would have been something that was off the charts, indescribable. Um, so I guess on the other side of things, there have been some calls that I have made that have gotten me some looks from administration. You and I talked earlier about you've had those as well. Have you ever had anything where maybe Mickey or Mr. Riley or Spo or some of the players came up and said that was really good, and they were really amused by that, or they really liked that, maybe wanted you to include something down the road with it?
you know, I can't say that they have, but I'll answer it in the positive this way. When you don't hear from them, that means everything's going great.
Yeah,
So, I mean, I certainly I've had conversations with Pat Riley. How he and I know each other. Obviously, I've worked for him for 30 years. But if you don't have Pat or his people coming and saying something to you, that's good. Take that as take that as everything's going fine.
yeah,
It's when they have to come see you. That's when things aren't going so great.
sure. Yeah, no news is good news in that regard. So let me see here. With all of this is kind of a weird question. I have never asked anybody this one. So, with all of the recent advancements in tech, like AI and things like that, do you foresee any changes to PA announcing or broadcasting in the future? Now that they can emulate voices and keep kind of different old school voices alive and make people, potentially just work from home and phone it in and just use a soundboard. Do you see anything like that happening, or what do you see the
Well,
future of the PA worker?
we haven't seen it, and I'll say we collectively because I will say this: many of us PA guys in the NBA have had this conversation. We have gotten together to talk about it and think, what is the future? So it's on our minds. The NBA owns the rights to what we do, so they can take that and use that as they'd like to. Um, I think it might be a little overwhelming based on our experience with the video game business.
Hmm.
It might be a little overwhelming for each individual team to take on that project, that
Yeah,
AI, that and frankly, the expense of it and the manpower needed to do it, are they getting enough juice out of that? I mean, I
right.
so I don't know. I don't think so. The human element in what we do is too important. If if the PA guy's role could be eliminated and done by pressing button B when Bam Adebayo scores a basket and press button T when Tyler Hero scores a basket, it would have been done already. And
Yeah.
so there's that human element because there's 20,000 humans in that building with us.
Right.
And so their reaction to me, my reaction to them, it could be nuanced at each and every game. And it's a live show, Joel. It's a
Mhm.
live show every night. You're going to need something that you didn't need the last game, and you might not need the next game, but you needed something different tonight. I just think it's too intricate of a job to where AI would wipe out the role of the PA announcer. But I do see, it's scary to
Yeah.
see, you know, deceased singers songs coming back and people, you're hearing them and they've got their, you know, computer image and likeness and
Hmm.
it's something that we've definitely talked about as a group that we think about. I I don't see it going to be an issue in my career, but boy, some of these young guys coming in, I'm not sure what's going to happen with it.
Yeah. It's frightening. I mean, I know a lot of people would love to hear Ray Clay calling Bulls games in 2035, but I just think the manpower, like you said, and the money put into just having a PA announcer just sound like Ray Clay, it would be too much.
So the only place that you can hear today that you
Hmm.
can hear Ray Clay calling Chicago Bulls games is on the NBA 2K game.
Really?
Because Ray is a legacy voice, they
Hmm.
classify him as a legacy voice, and so he's on the game. So if you're playing as Chicago in Chicago, you have your choice. You can
Oh,
take
okay.
you can take their PA guy, you can take Ray, whichever one you want, and so that's that's the only place you can do it. And
Okay.
I I just yeah, it's a concern.
Yeah, absolutely. I work in IT. That's my day job, and so these kind of questions kind of crop up, and then it makes me think, how is this going to bleed into my night job, my future in that? So, yeah, didn't mean to frighten you this early in the
No,
morning. So,
oh, certainly, certainly not. But again, it's easier for me to say in my stage of my career now than it would be if it was like this when I first started. I'd really have this in the front of my mind. So,
yeah, I think voices like you and Mason are irreplaceable. Yeah, like you said, the human element is just too impactful to the game, to everyone around you. So,
yeah, it's nice. You look at the guys, and Dan Roberts just announced that he's going to
mhm,
retire after this year. Second longest tenured PA guy with one team in the NBA. Lawrence Tanter's number one with the Lakers.
mhm,
Then you had Roberts at Utah, Paul Porter with Orlando, and
yep,
then me with the Heat. So, and you look at so many guys have been there. For me, it's 34. That's like forever. But a lot of guys have been there for a long time. You don't
mhm,
get a lot of turnover in these jobs now. And that's not the way it always was. Because as I
right,
said, it was more of a thankless job. Well, somebody's got to do it. So just find somebody to go do it. But now it's more of a job where maybe it was a stepping stone. You used it to go from one voice job to another, whether that be in radio or television or play by play or something. It has become such a part of the entertainment aspect of the game that guys stay in the position for a long time.
yeah,
You got Tim Sinclair, who has stayed, Olivier Cedra. They've stayed and they've moved to different cities, but stayed in the NBA, moving to new organizations. So, I mean, it's a job that people really want. I don't know how many people auditioned when I did 34 years ago, but I can only imagine what the line and the long line and the list of people that are going to audition for Dan Roberts' job in Utah, because PA
yeah.
jobs are kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah, they're fun. It's kind of your own way to contribute to your team, right? Your hometown
Correct.
team or anything like that too. And everyone wants their little 15 minutes of fame as well. So yeah, I get it. I understand that completely. Here's a question you've probably gotten a dozen times. I'd be silly not to ask on a podcast such as this, but what advice do you have for a young announcer or broadcaster even trying to represent their local pro sports team?
Yeah. The most important thing I try to tell people is build a resume. Do the best you can to build a resume that shows that organizations have trusted you with an open microphone. Because frankly, if you're doing this, you have figured out that you got the voice to do it. You understand the sport that you're doing. Now you just have to prove that you're trustworthy with an open microphone, that you're not going to embarrass that organization or that school or that team. And so, how do you do that? Well, I say you build a resume by trying to put on it big games in your field of expertise. So, as a young guy talking to myself when I was in high school, what would I tell myself? Well, I'd say, "Hey, you're doing basketball games at Gulliver. Are there holiday tournaments that you can go and do during December, November? Find those. Are there championship games in town that are played? Go and offer to do those. Contact people and offer to do those." And it doesn't always, I know this is a hard one for people to swallow. It doesn't always have to be a paid gig.
Right.
Building a resume with important gigs is going to lead to paid gigs. I promise. I lived it. It's the way it goes. So I would try to do that as best I can. And then you want to move up in rank. If you're working at the junior college, you want to try to get to maybe a D2, or maybe you can get to a backup as a D1. So you always want to show that ladder and prove that trust. That's the most important thing. And I think big games matter. If you show that you did a tournament championship game or a state championship game, that's going to mean a lot in the eyes of people that are looking at your resume saying, okay, this guy's shown that he can really, number one, handle the stress of a big game. And number two, he's trustful enough to where he's not going to embarrass the organization that's brought him in or her in.
Yeah, that's sound advice. It's common sense, but I think people need to kind of hear that just to digest it and let it know, okay, this is what I actually need to do instead of trying to fill in the gaps themselves, create their own path to it. Like, oh, I need to become a songwriter, or I need to take voice lessons, or I need to do all these other things, and just stay in your lane,
That's
do what
it.
you do.
People have asked me over all these years, been a PA announcer for 40 years, been in the NBA for, as we said, 34. Any thoughts of going into radio or going into play-by-play or going into analysis? And I always say, I know my lane. I know what I'm most effective at. And
Right.
this is what it is. This is what I am skilled for. And so, no, I don't have any aspirations to deviate from that. I'm going to stay in my lane and keep doing this for my entire career.
No, yeah, you found your niche for sure. That's no doubt about that. So I think my last question here, pretty fun one, pretty easy. You may or may not have this. Do you have a Mount Rushmore of PA or ring announcers or anybody like that you hold not necessarily the highest regard, but just some favorites?
Well, I guess for me personally, Dave Zinkoff would have to be on that because he was kind of my inspiration. I got one last story about Dave, if you don't mind. I
Fire
love
away.
telling this story. So, as I mentioned at the top of the podcast, um, I learned listening to Dave on television in the background, and then I became an announcer and was announcing college basketball and was hired by the Orange Bowl committee to work an Orange Bowl tournament. And they came to me and said, we'd like you to be a part of the tournament, but you're not going to be the PA announcer. And I was like, well, that's strange. That's what I do.
Right.
So, well, we'd like you to be the spotter for the PA announcer that we're bringing in to announce. I was like, okay, who would I be spotting for? We're bringing in the PA voice of the Philadelphia 76ers, Dave Zinkoff, to announce the two tournament games, and we'd like you to be his spotter. Oh my God. So here I am sitting next to my mentor, my
Yeah.
idol. First time I met him, he didn't even know who I was. And he I knew his rhythm so well that I'm delivering all the lines to him. He was well at the end of his career, and
Mhm.
so needed some help with the game. It's moving so fast, and so I'm feeding him his lines exactly how he says them, because I know exactly how he says his lines.
Yeah.
And of all things, again, as I said, he was the voice of the Sixers, and their most popular player was a guy named Julius Erving. One of the college teams had a kid by the last name of Irving on their team. So what do you know? What a coincidence. You get a Dave Zinkoff
Yeah.
Irving. I mean, right there. That so Dave's definitely on it. Without a doubt, the guy who has made the most with Let's Get Ready to Rumble, you got to figure Buffer, right? Buffer's got to be
Sure.
on that thing.
Yeah.
Um, and short of that, I mean, those are the guys that, and obviously it dates me a little bit.
Yeah.
But there's just too many really, really good voices out there. Um, you've got guys in the NFL, you've got guys
Hmm.
in all walks of sports that are just really Alan Roach in the NFL, who does every Super Bowl, does all of the big games
Yep.
for the NFL. Allen is amazing, an amazing voice. So there's so many. I'm probably should be naming 10 other guys, but we'll leave it at that.
No, I understand. Yeah, I could go on for days about them, but yeah, but I digress. So if I could break the fourth wall here just for a minute, I just want to say that I am a huge fan of your work as well as the Miami Heat, and it's been just a huge pleasure to actually make your acquaintance, have some time with you, and pick your brain. It really is an honor and a privilege to me. So thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to do the show with me today. Like I said, the Heat had a game last night, and they got plenty more coming up. So just to have you on here for a little while really means a lot to me, not only as a fan, as a podcast host, but yeah, it really hits the heart well. So thank you, Michael. I really do appreciate having you on and getting a chance to speak with you today.
Well, listen, thank you for the invitation. It's great to meet you, and best of luck with the podcast and all the Heat fans out there. Let's go Heat. To those that may not be Heat fans, may be fans of other teams, that's okay too. Just make sure you listen in when your team comes to Miami to take on the Heat.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Michael, thank you so much. And I will go ahead and pause this out. I will stop recording.